This is Norbert Herber from Indiana University and GQ Audio. This lesson gets into some of the more challenging ideas and techniques presented in the book Composing Music for Games by Chance Thomas. The idea of a layered loop is fairly straightforward. Each individual musical loop is composed so that it can be repeated indefinitely. Then, in a middleware program such as FMOD, these loops are layered on separate tracks within the same event. As states change within the game world, individual tracks are mixed in real time. This creates a version of the game music that is appropriate to what the player is currently doing. So here is how you create a layered loop event in FMOD. We start over here in Events, right-click, choose New Event, and then appropriately, let's go ahead and call this layered _ loop. And as always, we'll select the master track, highlight this 3D panner, and hit delete. Or we'll right-click and hit delete because it doesn't seem to want to do it the other way right now. Import audio file, and we're going to grab loop layer 1, 2, and 3. All of those are imported here into our audio bin. And because we have 3 sounds that we want to work with, we need to have 3 tracks. So you can right-click on audio 1, choose add audio track, do that again, and then go ahead and drag each loop layer onto its corresponding audio track. I think just intuitively it makes sense to stack these 1, 2, 3 from top to bottom. Need a little bit more room to work here, so I'm going to hide the properties, get that out of my way, and I'll go ahead and expand this so that we can see everything. Great. These are meant to be loops. We play them back. We'll hear what they sound like. This is everything at once. We can hear just the first one. Here's just the second. And here's just the third. Third and the first. And there we are with all 3 again. So all these tracks work together, and they can be heard side by side, and the mix can change in real time. And that's exactly what this FMOD event is going to do, is allow these tracks to crossfade one into the next, and those changes will be made relative to the gameplay, so that what you hear when this music is mixed in real time has a direct connection to what's going on inside the game. So let's continue working on this. First of all, these need to be loops, and they're not set to do that right now. If you highlight or select each track over here in the deck, you can click on this loop button, and that will loop it. You can see that it just changes it from a waveform to a more generic looking blue box. We'll do the same thing for audio 2 and audio 3. So now all of those are going to loop. And in order to get this to work smoothly so that the rhythm is consistent, it's good to let FMOD know the tempo of the music. So I'll right-click up here in the Logic Tracks section and choose Add Tempo Marker. Double-click there. By default, it says 120 beats per minute and 4/4 time. I'm going to change this to 90 beats per minute. And then once I've typed the value in, I'll slide that all the way to the beginning. And that just lets FMOD know that its timeline should move at a speed of 90 beats per minute. The other thing that I'll do is create a workspace that's a little easier to see. I think if I drag this so that it's at the 11 bar mark, that should give us enough room for what we're going to work on with this event. and then, yeah, and it zooms in, and this should give us enough room for what we want to do. So we sort of have the stage set, and now we're ready to really dive into the specifics of getting this technique to work. Go ahead and choose File, Save, or Save As if you haven't named the project yet. There's a lot left to do, and it's good to make sure this is saved so if we have any problems along the way, we don't end up losing everything. Well, before we go any further, let's take a look at what this file should look like when it's all finished. I think that'll make it easier to explain everything that's about to come. I have this version. This is done. This is what we're going to create in this lesson. And the way Chance set this up, he wanted to have 5 distinct musical conditions that would play in order. So this collection right here lets you see the first condition. It's going to loop in this area. Audio 1 will be audible, but you can see that the volume for audio 2 and 3 are all the way down. The next condition, condition 2, is this section right here. Audio 1, its volume is still all the way up. In fact, that doesn't change at all. Audio 1 will be audible throughout all of these conditions. But here you can see there's some automation, and audio 2 is now audible, but loop layer 3 down here in audio 3, that's still silent. We can't hear that one yet. We do hear that as soon as we get here to the next condition, condition 3, in which loop layer 3, loop layer 2, and loop layer 1 are all audible. This is the point where the musical arrangement is at its fullest. We can hear all of these tracks. Moving on to the next 2 conditions, the process is reversed. Condition 4 keeps audio 1, of course. Audio 2 is still audible, but loop layer 3 has faded out and is no longer audible here in the 4th condition. Then finally in the 5th condition, loop layer 3 is gone, loop layer 2 is gone, and we're left here just with audio 1. And you can see that there's a lot of different things up here that help direct traffic from one condition to the next, automation that allows the volume to change as you move from condition to condition. So let's look at how all those things are done in context. We're back with the file that we were working on together. The first thing that we'll do is make the looped sections for each of the 5 conditions. So we're going to create a series of 1-bar loops, and we're going to put them all at the odd bar numbers, so 1, 3, 5, etc. Here's how you do that. We'll just right-click in any area of a logic track right now and choose Add Loop Region. I'm going to drag that loop region up and over, and then I'll stretch it out. And now that FMOD has this tempo marker in here, you'll notice as you drag things around that it will, by default, it will snap to the beat or subdivisions of the beat. So it'll be really easy for you to get that loop so that it's just a single bar loop here in the span between 1 and 2. Let's do the same thing here again at bar 3. And we'll do it again at bar 5. And 7, and lastly here at 9. So now you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loop regions for each of our 5 conditions in this event. Now, we need to move on and create the automation data, and that will allow audio 2 and 3, or loop layer 2 and 3 that are on those tracks to fade to the appropriate volume level as we move from one condition to the next. We'll start with audio 2. I'm going to right-click and choose Add Automation. It opens up this little sub-track. I'm going to click here, right on the blue line. This is condition 2. That says that the volume should be at 0 dB or unity when it reaches that point, and then I'll click over here on the left, drag over, and I'm going to let that fade start at the third beat of the second measure. So it creates a 2-beat fade transition that takes me into this second condition. Now we could continue working on this automation data, but I think it's easier at this point to put in some of the markers that we need. I think it will just make it more clear how this whole project is going to be arranged. So again, I'll right-click here in Logic Tracks, and I'm going to choose Add Marker. I'll drag this marker to the same point where we put that automation point, and then I'll drag it up to create some space, and I'm going to call this Condition 2. I can do the same thing here at the beginning for Condition 1. Right-click, Add Marker, double-click, give it a name. And now, just for the sake of consistency, and I think it'll make it easier going forward for the rest of the lesson, I'm going to go ahead and put in the rest of these condition labels. Then they'll be there to kind of guide us through these next few steps. So Condition 3 is going to go here, add marker, Condition 3. And that's on the third beat of the fourth bar. Right-click and add another marker, Condition 4. That's on the third beat of the sixth bar. Third beat of the eighth bar, add a marker, and that's Condition 5. And make sure that's in the right place. Yeah, so now each of those markers just lets us see where we're headed with each of these conditions, and that's going to make things a whole lot easier. Well, now that we have everything in place, let's go ahead and create what we need to happen with the automation here for Condition 3. Things are getting a little crowded down here, so I'm going to hide this area. FMOD calls this the deck. Under View, you can choose Deck, or you see that there's a letter D there. You can just hit D on your keyboard and toggle that on and off. I'm going to keep that off for now because it creates space for right-click, Add Automation. Audio 3's automation is now audible. Well, not audible, visible. Condition 3 requires that Audio 3 have its volume all the way up, and then we'll do the same thing that we did before. So as the FMOD timeline moves into Condition 3, that volume will fade up, and at this point, Loop Layer 3, Loop Layer 2, and Loop Layer 1 are all audible when they play back within this loop region. Going forward to Conditions 4 and 5, we really just reverse the process. Condition 4 calls for just Loop Layer 1 and 2, so that means we need to fade out Loop Layer 3. So I'll add the automation so that we have a fade out over that same span of time. And looping in Condition 4, here between bar 7, 8, we won't hear 3, but we'll still hear 2 and 1. And we'll do the same thing here for Condition 5. We want to take the volume down so that Loop Layer 2 goes away. So we'll add this automation and allow that fade out to happen so that when we're looping here at bar 9 in Condition 5, we're only going to hear Audio 1. This is a good point to save your work. We'll move on to the next step and add the final components that, well, for lack of a better term, listen for the game states to change so that the musical transitions that we've just created will happen at the correct times. FMOD does this by assigning a parameter, and that parameter will change value, and as it does, you can cause the event timeline that we have here to move around and jump, in this case, from one condition to the next. You create a parameter by clicking on the tab with the plus sign right here, and then choose Add Parameter. We're going to name it Condition, and we'll set the minimum value to 1 and the maximum value to 5. Click OK, and you'll see a small change in the interface. Condition as a parameter gets its own timeline from 1 to 5. And you also see that there's now a little knob. This control knob allows you to move across those parameter values. And this becomes a really useful means of testing your events in FMOD once you have everything set up. We'll go back to the main timeline now, and we can start to put this into place. Now, we'll add the components that listen for these parameter values to change. We'll start with the logic tracks section and just find some available space in the black area where you can right-click. And from the menu that appears, choose the option Add Transition Region to, and then go over and pick Condition 2. It creates this little green bar. We'll do the same thing we did before. Click and drag and kind of force it to go up and above everything else that's there. It just makes it easier to see everything that's here. Its width needs to be identical to that of the loop region, so that as Condition 1 is playing, looping within this first bar, the playback head will always be in contact here with this transition region. What that means is that as this condition changes, as soon as the transition region realizes that it's beyond a threshold that you set, it will do what it's instructed, which is essentially, in this case, jump ahead to Condition 2. In order to get it to do that, we need to define a few more parameters, though. Right now, we don't see the deck, and we need the deck. So we'll choose View, Deck. It opens up this area. Make sure that your new transition region is highlighted. The deck should look like this if it is. And then click on the gray plus sign, choose Add Parameter Condition, and then choose the option Condition. That's the parameter that we just created up here. And you'll see that by default it spans the full range of values for this from 1 to 5. Well, in order to jump to Condition 2, we just want to check to see when it's at a value of 2. Well, defining 2 exactly is not a very easy thing to do with this interface. So what I usually do is just give it a little extra wiggle room of about 0.25. So I'm going to set this at 1.75. And again, this is another one that's kind of hard to set manually. It's easier to just double click and type 1.75. And then I'll do the same thing here. Rather than drag it to 2.25, I'm just going to type 2.25. So when the condition is at 2, give or take 0.25, this transition region will do what it's instructed to do, which in this case, jump to Condition 2. So here, let's save and then have a listen. Whoops. Let's start that from the beginning. Double click on the stop button to get it to jump to the beginning, and we'll play it from there. Oh yeah, well, it's jumping to Condition 2 immediately because condition is right now set to 2.14. So yeah, my mistake shows you exactly how this works. This is what I wanted to show you. I'm going to move the condition all the way down to 1 and hit play. And now it's just going to loop in this region. And it's not going to jump ahead because the parameter knob says condition is currently equal to 1. This transition says don't jump ahead to Condition 2 until it's within the range of 1.75 to 2.25. Well, I can drag this ahead. And you saw right as it reached a value that was 2 or greater, it automatically jumped to this transition region. There's nothing here in FMOD to direct its playback. I'm going to stop that so you can hear me a little bit better. When it jumps from this transition region to the marker condition 2, there's nothing here that's going to control the playback. So it will play from this point and continue on. But then as soon as it crosses into bar 3, it's within this loop region. So you could see and hear how it sort of got locked into that looped groove, and it will continue to play there. And it will continue to do that indefinitely until another transition region says, if the condition value changes, then jump ahead to condition 3. And that pattern repeats throughout all of these. Condition 3 will wait for a new value to jump to 4. The loop at condition 4 will wait for a new value to jump to condition 5. And the whole thing falls together just like that. So let's go ahead and put the rest of these conditions in there. The process is going to be identical to what we did before. It's just that we'll have slightly different values. So I'll right-click, add transition region to condition 3. Stretch that out so that it fills the full span of that loop. And then click down here in the deck. Make sure that we're tracking the parameter called condition, and we will set this value to 2.75 and 3.25, or roughly a value of 3. Double click, and before I do anything else, save. Click on play. Oh, and again, make sure I bring condition back to the beginning, because that's where the game is most likely to be when this event would start. Click play. We're off and running in the first loop of condition 1. I'll change the value up here of condition, bring it to a value close to 2. And you see that it jumps to that new condition. And now that we have a new condition or a new region here, we can change the value and have it jump ahead to condition 3. I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. I'm going to double click on the parameter, type in the value 3, and I don't think you can see this right now, but just trust me that it's there. And I'm going to hit enter, and as soon as I do, you'll see the knob change to a value of 3. You'll see the playback head jump to that condition 3 marker, and then enter into the loop at bar 5. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, change. The timing was really great there. It just happened to be that there was a swell of the strings, so you could really hear how the sound changes, how this musical arrangement changes when audio 3 and loop layer 3 are now part of the arrangement. Okay, I'll stop that. This should make sense now. You can see that there's sort of a pattern forming here, and that pattern is going to repeat as we go through and set up things for conditions 3, 4, and 5. So let me go ahead and do that right now. Right click, add transition region 2, condition 4. Change the size of that to match the loop. Set the parameter correctly. And in this case, we want the range to be 3.75 to 4.25. And we'll do this one last time. Condition region, that's going to jump to our final, condition 5. Set the size, highlight, assign a parameter, and this one is going to be 4 3/4, 4.75 to a value of 5. That's our maximum, so that one stays as is. File, save, reset our conditions, jump back to the beginning, and click on play. And I'll go through and we'll listen to the whole thing. Here we are looping in condition 1. Change the parameter, and now we're here in condition 2. You can see the levels. If you don't hear it musically, you can definitely see the levels that were in loop layer 1 and 2. I'm going to change the condition again and move on to 3. Let's move on to condition 4. Arrangement has thinned out a little bit. We've faded out of loop layer 3, so we're here in a section where we just hear loop layer 2 and 1. And I go all the way up to 5 to hear a final condition. I'm going to let this loop for a second and just talk about something that's really important to understand technically. Loop layer 1 has been playing this entire time. And you can see here that the region itself is limited to 11 bars, but clearly it's been playing far more than 11 bars. Well, if you remember back to an earlier step, when we created this, down here you can see in the deck, that audio file was set to loop. And in FMOD, when this button is checked, regardless of the size of this region, as long as the playhead comes into contact with it, that sound file will be made to loop indefinitely. Well, this audio file was composed so that it would have a smooth loop and be able to repeat itself indefinitely. So, as long as the playhead comes into contact with it, even in a looping region like this, it is going to continue to play on its own until it's manually stopped or stopped by some sort of call from within the code of the game. I'll go ahead and stop it on my own right now. The final step with this layered loop event is to create a fade so that when this event is told to stop, there is a gradual fade out that allows this one to transition neatly into the next one. It's the same sort of thing we've done with the nested loop in the intro. We'll repeat that exact same process here, and it works identically. I'm going to, yes, I need the deck, so we'll keep the deck. I just need to be able to see the master track. Highlight master, right click on the volume, choose add modulation, and then go to AHDSR. This is the same thing we've done before. Attack, just drag that, make sure its level is at 0, but it's set to a duration of 0. We don't want any sort of a fade in. We just want a fade out here. Fade out of 3 seconds sounds right for this, so I'll double click, type in the value of 3, and I now have a release or a fade value of 3 seconds. You can test it. I'll reset the condition to 1, jump back to the beginning with a double click there, play, and then as always just click, hold the stop button, fades it over 3 seconds, and that's it. It's done. This is completely ready to go in your game. I do have a few other thoughts to share with you about these techniques, however. First of all, the condition numbers that I assigned are completely arbitrary. Condition for this parameter 1 through 5. That's just something that I did for the benefit of this tutorial. I wanted to be consistent with the names, condition 1, condition 2, and so on. But your game projects, can use whatever numbering scheme the designers and the programmers that you're working with recommend based on the way that their code runs. Also, as this is set to work right now, it's only possible to move through these conditions sequentially. In your game, you may need to have different kinds of behavior from FMOD, jumping from condition 1 to 4 to 3, back to 1, etc. And it's entirely possible, but it's really beyond the scope of this particular lesson. But take a look in the description below. There's some additional resources in there, and that can help you find, get the help you need in order to create that sort of behavior. I do have one last tweak with this, and that's levels. As I've listened to it while we were building it, it really just didn't seem to be balanced correctly. Loop level 1 loop 1 is a little too loud, and loop 2 is just a little too soft. So I can tweak those pretty easily. Loop 1 is the easiest to do. It doesn't have any automation, so any changes that I make here to the volume of the track will just be preserved throughout the whole thing. So I can go ahead and bring that down -2 dB and make that one a little bit softer. Audio 2, however, isn't more complicated. It just needs to be handled differently, and that's because its volume is actually set by the automation data. So if I want this to be 2 decibels louder, I don't do anything here. Volume of the track is controlled by the automation. I need to change the value that's here in the automation. I'm going to go ahead and bump that up by 2 dB. I'll do it in both places so that the volume is consistent across that whole plateau of automation. And that should allow everything to balance out and sound the way that I want it to. And as you do that, as always, just be careful that the position of these dots doesn't change left to right. You don't want the timing to be altered at all. You're just trying to drag them up so that the volume level of that is different. And this is what I'm doing for these particular tracks. With your own tracks, you may find that you have to do the adjustments differently, but you can use these techniques and it will apply identically. So there you have it. That's how you create a layered loop and control it with in-game parameters in FMOD. Again, take a look in the description below. There's links for all the sound files that were used here and some other resources that can help you with this. And again, there's a gray box demo. This is a working version of this FMOD project in a simple Unity game. It allows you to see and hear in context how all of this works. Thanks so much for watching.